Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Moses and you are listening to the AHP Leader Podcast. And this podcast is a series of podcast specials where we're celebrating AHP Day. And we're celebrating AHP Day with 4 different podcasts. And this one is specifically celebrating inspirational role models. So AHPs from ethnically diverse backgrounds, also from the LGBTQIA plus community. So I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's joined me today on this panel. And I just want to start by getting everyone to introduce themselves. So Arun, I'm coming to you first. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel, for arranging this podcast. I am Arun Joseph, and I am a respiratory/critical care physio by background. Currently, I'm a lecturer for 2 days a week at Coventry University, and I'm also doing my PhD for 3 days a week at the University of Oxford at Jesus College. I would identify myself as a gay man with pronouns he and him. I was born to Indian parents, but I'm naturalized as a British citizen. Yeah, that's about me.
Thank you so much. Hunter, coming down to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Rachel, for inviting me to this. My name's Hunter. I am an occupational therapist. I am specializing in mental health. I am a gay male OT. I am from Indian Pakistani background, but British born. I'm first generation. I am, my pronouns are he, him, and his. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kiran.
Hi there, my name's Kiran. I'm a rotational physio working in the east of England at the moment. I have both Indian and Pakistani heritage. I was born here and raised in London, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Thank you. And Ed.
Hello there, my name's Ed Sum. I'm an occupational therapist and my kind of speciality is neurological practice, and I work in the east of England as well. I'm also chair of the Long-Term Conditions Forum of the Neurological Practice Specialist section, and also treasurer of Open Pride. So still heavily involved with that. So hopefully moving back to Scotland to get even more involved. And my parents were from Hong Kong, so I'm Chinese, but I was born in Nottinghamshire. So I identify as gay, cis male. My pronouns are he, him, his.
Thank you. And I'm loving the badges. I mean, you're giving Darren a run for his money there. Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, I love it. Oh, Ed, I love you.
I was going to glitter my beard up, but I thought, no, that's just like over the top.
Oh, no, you should have.
Glitter.
Well,
OTs not get enough of glitter.
And here goes the tone of the conversation, so I love it already. On the next series of podcasts, Ed, we're definitely gonna glitter it up for sure. So we're going to start the conversation with role models. So why are role models even important? I mean, are they important for our professions? There's some different opinion here, but, you know, I just want to come into you first, Hunter, and just, you know, ask a question. Are role models important and why?
Absolutely. As AHPs, we are, even though we are established now, we are still in new professions and we are still starting to be valued within the wider healthcare profession. And having role models that are diverse and have come from different backgrounds are very important to help guide our future practitioners and current practitioners throughout those political and practice journeys that we all experience every day.
So in terms of the importance of role models, and you've just touched on it, role models that look like me, role models that are like me, role models that I can identify with, is like, how important is that for you personally?
Very important, because I think having somebody who can understand the culture that I've been raised in, who can understand the values that I hold, and actually not just, you know, learn about them from a textbook, but actually have experienced them and understand them and realize the challenges and barriers that I, as a practitioner, or when I was a student, may have faced, and how they could have supported me better through those. So that's, yeah, it is absolutely very important.
Okay, so the next point of this then is, why do we think there's a lack of AHP role models from ethnically diverse backgrounds, also part of the LGBTQI plus community? I mean, why? This is obviously multifactorial, and I'm probably asking what seems like a really basic, obvious answer question, but why do we think this is?
Well, let's look at the history of, let's just look at the history of the UK firstly. The UK is, well, and has always been, a white heteronormative country, that its laws even today are heavily based on heteronormativity, and those laws influence not just policies and practice, but also the ethical and moral practices that exist within healthcare. And if you are to have somebody who is from a different culture or a different background that actually challenges these and says these are constricting, these are not right, those people are silenced, or they are seen as, oh no, this is unprofessional and not part of our profession, this is not right. And that actually is in itself, I would argue, homophobic and racist, because of the heteronormativity, and that white privilege that exists within the healthcare and legal systems.
So you mentioned, and this is why I think this podcast has been requested by so many, because we know there is institutional racism that exists within healthcare and within our professions. I mean, if we didn't know that, we certainly know that now after the last 2-3 months. Not only that, healthcare inequalities with regards to ethnicity is, you know, at the forefront like never before. The evidence has always been there. I think it's just never been there during a pandemic. But then there's also that intersectionality between LGBTQI plus and what it means to be part of a community which is also classed as a minority and not normal. So it's against the normal societal norm. So this is where it starts to become, I think, much more complex and multifaceted. So what you're saying is, if you are from an ethnically diverse background where you already have institutional barriers, racism, discrimination that exists, then why are you going to then identify as part of another, you know, minority, marginalized community? And why are you going to put yourself in that situation to be a role model when actually you're probably going to face even more discrimination?
Well, yeah, I mean, look at some of the things that we have. We have unofficial non-disclosure policies of, you know, oh, don't be talking about you being gay. It's that's not very professional boundaries. No, I'm sorry, but actually it's part of your therapeutic rapport building. And then the next excuse that's used, oh, it's to protect you. No, I'm pretty sure I can protect myself, and I'm pretty sure that as an organization, you're supposed to protect me and my identity, not ask me to hush up. When all the evidence there says that the more you repress your sexual identity, the more it's going to affect your mental health, your vocational performance, your occupational satisfaction, and engagement levels. So, go figure. It's exactly what you've just said.
Yes, yeah, I'm completely relating to this. Ed, I'm coming into you.
I think for me, it kind of triggered some sort of memories, which actually isn't probably kind of outside my family unit, really. Actually, coming out as gay to my parents was very traumatic. It's very difficult. They didn't accept that. And almost within the next breath to say that I was an occupational therapist also was quite distressing to them as well. I think they had aspirations that I'd be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. So actually within my own family was really kind of difficult to kind of come out and not meet their expectations. So I think even within my upbringing, it was, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to earn lots and lots of money. What is this profession? And whatever that's about. I was one of the popular sons, and I was supposed to give my mum lots of grandchildren, and that was kind of my expectation for my parents. So also to disappoint them was quite a major thing, really. So I think also there may be lots of people where to go into any allied health profession probably is not what their family would have wanted for them.
Okay, so there's the stereotyping within the family and within the society and then within the culture. Kiran, coming down to you, please.
I think this goes kind of back to sort of why we have that lack of LGBT and sort of BAME AHP role models, and it's essentially it's that like Venn diagram, or that confluence of being from different minority backgrounds. So you've got for example, in my case, being Asian and also being a lesbian. So first of all, I came out to my parents about 5 or 6 years ago. I knew for a decade, and I was hiding it from them for a decade. And I originally started off as an osteopath, bounced into sort of digital marketing, and then I came home to physiotherapy. And along that journey, it's a really difficult journey for people to go through, but particularly those of, I think, Asian backgrounds, where being a homosexual is still taboo. And so you've got this sort of it's almost like pitting two backgrounds against each other. And so you have situations where, for example, for me, where the individual might feel confident with their sexuality, but their family might not be. And so, it's like trying to forge yourself within that environment. You're going up against more than just one thing. And that kind of leads on to sort of, I feel like I can hide the fact that, I'm a lesbian, but I can't hide the fact that I'm brown. And so that brings up, I think, a whole bunch of different issues in our profession at the moment as well. So I think that can be another barrier, and another reason why we don't have a lot of these role models, why we don't have a lot of sort of LGBTQIA and ethnically diverse sort of people at the forefront of our professions.
Absolutely, and certainly I've got lots of comments here from people who would have loved to join the podcast, but for whatever reason, for their personal reasons, felt very, they weren't confident to do this in a public forum. And some of exactly what you're saying there is ringing true. Hunter, coming down to you for comments.
I just wanted to add, something to echo something that's been said, that actually, as somebody from an ethnically diverse background and being a gay man, one of the things that you experience is that you experience discrimination on bi-dimensional level. You experience it not just as from your skin color, but also you experience it from your sexuality. And then there's the fact that, you're seeking acceptance, and that acceptance you'll never get 100% from within your cultural community. But also when you seek it within the British community in which you were born into, there is a lack of that acceptance within that because of your skin color. So it's like, as Kiran said, you might be able to hide your sexual identity, but then you can't really hide your brown skin. So it's a bi-dimensional level of, discrimination, essentially.
Yeah, so one of the comments that I had, and I don't know if this rings true for anyone, is around culture, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. So to give you one example, it was a female who was an occupational therapist as well, actually, and she was often felt under pressure with social events to go out, and even she didn't drink alcohol, but she, she did on this occasion go out to a leaving party, and all of the time being asked about who her boyfriend was and what did her boyfriend do and how long has she not had a boyfriend for. And she just decided to disclose that actually she had a girlfriend, and that she'd been in the team for over 2.5 years and never felt confident to share that. But from that moment, she was treated completely differently, and treated differently from people of similar ethnicity to her as well. And she ended up leaving that job because she had to then oppress what was her authentic self, even though she felt she had almost been forced into disclosing that. So the reason I'm telling that story is because sometimes people need to think, and when they're from a heteronormative background, or they have this idea of what is normal, that when you're pushing for a question and there's no specific answer, or people bat it away, then you just need to drop it. You can't push that question. And it's even okay not to have a partner of any description. And I think sometimes in this day and age, people think you have
partners.
to. Or several partners, exactly, Ed. And I think I really want to get that point early on for people who do that in a social context, or have those conversations, that people really need to feel like they're in an inclusive, safe space when they start to share things like this, when they can't, because they are marginalized against a normative societal norm. So,
and
Ed,
I do wonder whether there's a difference between being a gay male and being lesbian, being bi and being trans. I think we're not we're not the same group. And I think also being Chinese male is, some of my Asian colleagues or some of my black colleagues may experience as well. Yeah, and I don't think we're all quite the same. So I think I'm lucky in terms of some of the lucky. I mean, that's it. Some of the racial abuse that I get or have got in the past is not as bad as what other people get. So I should be grateful for, being called certain names when I was at school or whatever, really, or people having the expectation that I'm going to be really good at maths. I am quite good at maths, but it's the microaggressions that we kind of come across as well. But I think, I think some people get it a lot worse than I do, and I genuinely believe that.
I think Ed, I understand what your point is there, but I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that it isn't about who gets it worse or who gets it a bit easier than others, because you can hide or you can hide certain parts of you, or certain races are seen as lower down that pyramid. But I think I think the point for me is that racism in and of itself, the experience of it for every person, is traumatizing and actually detrimental. And I think we need to recognize that, and actually we need to say that no, it's not okay, and actually no, being slightly racist to one person and more racist to another person is still not okay. But I do hear what you're saying. I do get what you're saying. It's a bit like, for example, I would sit there and think, oh God, I'm lucky that I'm an Asian male and I don't choose to wear a headscarf because I'm female and Asian. And actually the female Asian colleagues that have those names thrown at them that our very own prime minister used of letterboxes and things like that. But I do hear what you're saying, but I think it's about, we need to stand up and say no,
definitely,
none of it is okay.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people the microaggressions you've just described, people aren't aware that they are. And it's really hard for the person experiencing that microaggression to turn around and say, actually, do you call it out for what it is? And this is where the education comes in, isn't it? This is where these conversations happen. This is what we're all doing tonight, is a very small part of it. But actually, if it gets people thinking about what they are, so you talking about some of your lived experiences and saying, this isn't okay, is really powerful for people. So we're kind of moving on to this in terms of challenges. So one of the things before we move on to role models and, really positive sharing of stories, I want to really touch on challenges that people have had. Now that may be challenges across your career, because you are from a minority group. And again, we talked about intersectionality within that. So Arun, can I come to you first, please, to kick us off? You've been patiently waiting there.
That's fine. I think it has been interesting conversations as well as contribution from Ed, Kiran, and Hunter and yourself. So it was very interesting to just listen and not talk. Coming to your previous question as well, Rachel, as you said that why there has been a lack of role models amongst the LGBTQ plus BAME category. And I had a reflection on this, and I just feel like, as Kiran, Ed, and Hunter touched upon, there is lots of family as well as societal expectations until you're 16 and 18, and not everyone is actually comfortable about their sexuality. And there is an initial pressure from parenting as well as the society itself. And then comes the physiotherapy admissions criteria and how the admissions screening process is, and whether they are actually considerative of all these factors of what are the things that these people have undergone, whether we just say yes, no, has to be 65% and more, and what privilege as well as what backgrounds and what journey have they actually undergone. Because most of them from the minority groups are very emotionally intelligent, as well as they can make very good physios as well as OTs. But is the screening process actually the right screening process? Is it a very quantitative process? And that's where I don't know whether we are going wrong from the admissions point of view. And secondly, say when they come into the curriculum, the physio curriculum itself, is it very heteronormative curriculum? We were talking a lot about decolonizing the curriculum. It's not about teaching the perfect manual hyperinflation. It is not about teaching about the perfect rehabilitation techniques, but it's also about consideration of these factors, which are very important. And we hear a lot about experiences from Black students, especially how they are being perceived by the clinical educators and how they are undermarked and all those things. And then we hear about patients who just say, advice about, oh, that is a wrong sexuality, you need to be of a different, of straight orientation, or they expect differently. So are we actually educating as well as equipping our future physio students to face these kind of situations, or are we just concentrating on p-values and getting those things right? And then coming into, so already you had the challenges from the society and the family, and then the screening process, and 50% of them are already filtered down. And then comes the curriculum, which is very straightforward, which says black and white, yes or no, this is how it has to work, perfect communication skills. And Hunter was saying about what is the difference between assertiveness as well as aggression in his culture to how the culture in Britain is, and why some of the LGBTQ plus BAME professionals, as smart as they are, because of that kind of communication barriers, are not able to reach that position within the NHS as such. So you've got various challenges like this adding upon at the top of the existing NHS challenges, like staffing levels and COVID situation and all those things. So you've got lots of burden to tackle. And finally, the amount of role models which are actually produced could be considerably less. And we don't know why that is, as they have to go through all these kind of barriers throughout their life. And this is where I do not know. Education is important, and we need to tackle that at every level. And it's not a one-person job, and it has to be an integrative kind of thing that can actually do a lot about this.
Absolutely agree. Kiran, coming in.
Oh my gosh, Aaron, those are so many. There are so many good points there. Like what you're talking about is going all the way from the difference between equality and equity. I know that's been sort of spoken about a lot on Twitter, but it's not just a case of presenting everybody with the same opportunities, but it's about ensuring that people are coming from the same, or the same, the starting blocks are the same as well. And then, I mean, that even goes as far as once you've become a physiotherapist, when you're or a allied health professional, going to the point where you feel, promotion wise, am I just ticking a box because I fall into this diversity category? So once you've been through this entire process of getting to where you want to be, when you eventually get to the point where you're being promoted, it's you end up thinking, am I just sort of ticking a box here, or am I as good as I think I really am? And I think that lack of confidence can really echo throughout those in similar situations such as ourselves.
Ed.
And I think,
go on,
Aaron.
And I think like Hunter touched upon this, and I think it's the difference, which is the key word here. Anything which is actually normal, anything which is quite subtle and stationary and do not rock the boat is our usual phrase. And anything different to that subliminal normal kind of stresses everyone out. But however, we need to develop that negative capability of tackling these things, because there are lots of evidence that students from these backgrounds are having lots of issues and they're not performing well in their studies. And once they actually pass on, once they have passed that calamity, once they have become professionals, they're not ever able to reach band 7 or band 8 positions, because the opportunities that has been presented to them, as Kiran said, there are lots of challenges that they have to already go through, and there is less resources because there's only 10 or 15% which is struggling. Why do we need to combat, actually focus our resources to these kind of population? And I think, as we said, this has to be acted now, and it's very important to, kind of tackle these, I believe. Yeah.
But I just want to pick up on a point there, and Ed, I'll come in to you, that you've just said there about not being a boat rocker. So people from, your background, don't be the boat rocker, keep your head down. I am not told that. I'm told to rock that boat. I'm told to be the rubber boat rocker, and I'm told as the bolshy, confident, loud, white female to do that. So isn't that interesting, and isn't that part of the problem? And I openly admit on some of the previous podcasts, when I was recruiting people, up until 5-6 years ago, that I would recruit people like me, because they would be the next me. So everything you've just said is so true, and I wanted to just acknowledge that, and we need to break that down. We need to break that, because that's wrong, and that's not inclusive, and that's not equal, and it's not equitable. And if you're listening to this as a manager, this is the problem. This is why the systemic racism will still continuously exist. So thank you for sharing that. Ed, coming into you.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of adds to those points that both my parents had very different views. My mum was very proud with her Hakka Chinese kind of heritage, whereas my dad was fit in with the local community, get on with them, and it will take you far. And that kind of, I kind of listened to my dad. My mum was kind of like, mum was kind of like, kind of with me. So I was kind of listening to my dad. So actually, I carried that through in terms of fit in. We can rock the boat a little bit, but fit in and get on with the people. Influence, mix with the people who are going to get you far. And it's all like some of the things where some of the managers or leaders would give me opportunities and kind of really push me, and I really struggled with that, because I thought, is this fair? Is this equal opportunities? Because that was kind of drummed into me from through my training and early years in my training. So I really struggled when somebody said, I believe in you, I'd like you to go on this course. It's like, well, what about everybody else? Shouldn't they be going on it? Is it fair? What's this about? What are you favouring? Is it because I'm male? Is that what you because you want to promote more male OTs? It was a kind of really struggle for me. It's like, we can't have nice things. We don't deserve it.
And that's so sad, isn't it? Because the risk there is that you're not going to fulfill your individual and professional potential there.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And I think going back to the recruitment and giving people opportunities that look like me, act like me, behave like me, that is still ingrained in our professions, and that that because of the people at the top.
Yeah.
And
I think,
that because of the people
yeah.
of positional power. So anyone that says that doesn't exist is they need to open their eyes and have a look. If you're in a senior leadership position, look at who's around you.
And I think there's the risk with some of the role models is you get the same role models, you get the same leaders, you get the same management, and people don't want. I mean, I've had conversations with people where they say, I don't want to be a manager. It's not that they don't want to be like that person who they see as a manager. And I think there's something about role models is that there's different types of role models. There's, I think that's what we want. We also want diversity of role models up there, and you can be like them, but also to feel confident, what, I can do it my own way. And I'm not quite sure how we're going to get that. Maybe a matter of time, maybe more of the presence.
I'm going to pick up on that point with an example in a moment. Hunter, I'm going to come down to you.
Yeah, so I totally agree with everything that's been said, but then we've also got to consider the other side of it, that actually there is the point where, you are told, just keep your head down, don't speak up. And then actually that's not you, that's not who you are. For example, I was told that all throughout practice placements, because I would speak up, because I was complained against for actually telling an OT, actually that patient made their cup of tea safely, because that's how an Indian lady would make a cup of tea. That was not risky. She moved the handle to the side of the cooker when she was boiling the water with the spices and the tea bag. And she brought it to a boil, but turned it off straight away before it boiled over. That is exactly how an Indian person makes a cup of tea. That in itself is racism there through and through. And then there is also the fact that actually we have to consider the fact, yes, there is positive discrimination, but then there's also the negative discrimination of actually you being told that calm down, you're being very anxious, when actually your speech is naturally fast because you've grown up in that culture. For example, you've grown up in a family of 13, 14 siblings. So actually you have to speak fast to get your point across. And that's how you've learned to talk. And these things are not taken into consideration and are not given any weight to. Instead, things are assumed, and you end up then thinking, oh crap, I just landed myself into a load of hot water. I'm just going to keep quiet and go along with their development plan of what they're telling me I need to do, so that I don't risk losing my job, or I don't risk rocking the boat any further because I seem to have rocked it too much. So there are all those things. And yes, I totally agree. There is the fact that we don't have, we have a lot of barriers that we face as both ethnically diverse populations, but also as identifying as LGBTQIA plus, because you have those barriers of screening. The assessments and the tools that are used are not culturally diverse in the NHS. They are not. In the UK, the models of practice that are taught are not culturally diverse. I think if we look at the discrimination in the academics, we received a whole, if I count the hours up, about 9 hours of teaching on the model of human occupation. Cower model was 45-minute seminar, when the Cower model is a lot more complex and a lot more useful to use with people from variety of cultures and for people who have verbal and speech deficits. It's a visual tool that can be used with them. So yeah, I totally agree that there are so many barriers, not just within how the practices and healthcare works, but also actually within recruitment, within teaching, within understanding people. Taking that time to sit down and have a chat and say, look, we just wondered, your speech is quite fast at times, and is, why do you think that is? Are you feeling nervous, or is it because that's just how fast you talk? If it is, do you mind just slowing it down a wee bit? Having that wee conversation with somebody is so much more better than saying, oh, calm down, you're getting anxious.
Yeah, or waiting until someone's had an interview and using it as an excuse to not give them the job, which happens a lot. Communication challenges, communication issues, these are often the words that are used, isn't it? That has, I suppose, enforces that glass ceiling for people. So
it's like, just to explain that a tiny bit, it's, I grew up learning Punjabi, Urdu, Hindi, Pashto, and some Persian. So those were the languages that I was taught from 0 months age, that I grew up listening to from my gran, my mum, my dad, and my older siblings. In my head, still to this day, I will at times struggle to find the word in English, and a lot of thoughts in my head will go through my head in Punjabi first. And then I will have to actively translate them in my brain before speaking them aloud. So when somebody uses the word communication challenges to me, I'm actually deeply offended by it when somebody uses that to me, because actually I am not communicationally challenged. They are. They don't have the patience to wait for that extra 10 seconds for that translation to occur in my brain. And
I hope everybody listens to this. This is just ringing so true, and just how you've articulated that. Thank you, Hunter. Do you want to come in, Kiran?
Yeah, just Hunter, thank you so much. That I can totally relate to that on so many levels, and also just to pick up on a couple of the points that you mentioned. Just going back to sort of students, as a student, it can often feel like ending up being like you're being judged on more than just what you're doing on placements. I feel sorry for some students these days, when actually they're putting in the effort, they're putting in the work, and they're still viewed for something other than that. So I think that's a really important note to think about. And the other thing was just on, it's something that sort of twigged in my brain, was about disabilities. Is something in ethnically diverse people with ethnically diverse backgrounds. Often they're not actually, things like dyslexia, for example, is not picked up in people until very late in life. And I think that's something that a lot of students can be challenged by, and is not noticed in a lot of these students. And again, that relates back to the equality versus equity thing as well. So there's a whole number of different sort of issues there that we should be sort of looking at from an educational standpoint and taking into consideration with our students on placement. It's just something that sort of raised a couple of sort of sparks in my mind there.
Yes, and yes, definitely. Ed?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really fascinating how languages affect our cognition and our thinking. Like, certain languages have different tenses to English, and I just wondered actually that actually when it comes to academic writing, how the languages we were brought up and how we think actually don't quite match English very well. So, in terms of some of the Chinese language, it's very much a kind of like a topic comment kind of. So with British Sign Language, it kind of works because it kind of has a similar structure. But actually, when it comes to academic writing, it's like, I'm going to talk about making a hot drink as an assessment, and then I'll make some comments about it. And whether that actually jars people's use of English, and I just don't know whether that's something people have noticed or anything, as students, or struggle with some sort of like writing that people say, no, don't do it like this, you structure it this way, this is the better. And for me, I mean, I started a doctorate and abandoned it because it's like, I don't get what you're trying to tell me how to write this. I can't write English. And so, there's lots of other reasons, but actually I just wondered whether people had experienced that as well in certain the comments about their essays or whatever.
That was my experience. That exactly. So firstly, I am dyslexic and dyspraxic. My dyslexia wasn't picked up until into my third degree, into my OT degree, actually, in the second year, when I was sat there in tears to my personal tutor and saying, I don't know what's happening, where I'm going wrong, help me please, and these are my difficulties. And that personal tutor luckily had traveled in the Middle East and stuff. And she's like, I'm going to refer you to the educational psychologist for an assessment for dyslexia and dyspraxia. For dyslexia, and they'll be able to assess if you've got dyspraxic tendencies as well. But then also on top of that, there is the fact that, Asian cultures, we are much more descriptive in our talking. And when we are discussing, for example, when we're describing a meal, people say, oh my God, you describe it so beautifully. Or when we're describing our cooking, they say, you describe it so beautifully. It just makes me, I can taste it in my mouth right now. And yes, we will sit there and we will look at the details and describe them, and we will critically reflect within ourselves. But criticizing somebody and being critical of others is something that's a big no-no in the Middle East, because it is disrespectful of other people and it's not taking into account what issues they may have. And then when it comes to writing, that's a challenge for people from ethnically diverse backgrounds, particularly those from the Middle East, where actually you are taught from a young age that is disrespectful, that is not right. Yes, develop yourself. Yes, reflect on yourself, but don't sit there and criticize other people. That's rude and disrespectful and dishonors you.
Right. So does that, like, when it came to writing patient notes, then was that quite interesting in terms of how you do that? Like, you've got to write concisely. You do your SOAP notes, do whatever. Was it actually quite?
I had so much criticism from my clinical supervisor about my OT reports. But then one thing that I've had is from all the community teams, I've had really positive feedback saying that your detailed OT reports have informed us into how we can develop a proper care plan for the patients, and actually showed us a lot more about the difficulties that they're experiencing and how we can support them better. So actually, I think this is a skill within ethnically diverse students that is being stamped out by a Caucasian heteronormative curriculum and practice, and another example of institutional racism. And this skill needs to be viewed positively and actually needs to be seen as what it is, as a strength, and develop that as a strength. And look at, activity analysis. We are breaking down activities to their very detail to look at where are the difficulties and issues and how can we support them to be overcome. And I think being somebody who looks at the details because of your ethnic background and of your cultural values, that's a strength, particularly in occupational therapy, and even more so in physiotherapy as well, because you have to break down that physical activity to look at, okay, is it pronation that's causing pain, or is it supination that they're struggling with? Is there a contracture, a mild contracture that's inhibiting them from being able to drive? All these things that you have to consider, they're details. They're the details. As the saying goes, the devil's in the details. So that skill should be seen as a strength and not be stamped out. And yeah, it's an example of a colonized curriculum where actually I don't think academics at all in any sector has caught up with the fact that we are a multicultural, ethnically diverse society, and that needs to be embraced.
And I think it's functional goal setting as well. I think for me, it doesn't take culture into account. So, and I learned this from a student at my time at St. George's, and just taking the time when they were writing a goal setting plan, and they wanted to write, kneeling. And I said, oh, why do you think kneeling's an important functional goal for this man, over, putting his shoes on? And, they said, well, his wife can have him put him shoes on, but his wife can't kneel for him to pray. And that would just never have entered my head as a physio that had been qualified, over 15 years at that point. And that was when one of my realizations in terms of understanding like my racism and my conscious biases around neglecting cultural importance and my lack of cultural competence at that point in my career, because I would have just never have ever, and I'm ashamed to admit it now, but that's definitely where it started. And the other point that I was going to make was around mentorship. So around that time when I went on my culture and understanding journey and really started to read the books and, and really opened my eyes as a Geordie from a working class background, very, very white British, is I opened the doors to mentorship, because I'd been really fortunate to have inspirational role models in my career, but also I'd experienced the other side. I had people who would try to oppress me, particularly around the time because of the gender of the person that I was with, and I couldn't be open about that because it would hinder my career and everything that we've kind of spoke about. And when I started to mentor, and I'll never forget, it was a Bangladeshi male physio, and I won't name him, and I was mentoring him. He was the nicest, kindest, most generous man I'd ever met, who used to bring me food. And it's interesting you mentioned food all of the time. And when I was mentoring him, and he kept hitting these barriers, and people kept saying, oh, he was saying he was aggressive, or he was shouty, and I just couldn't get it into my head. And it was because of how he was perceived when I was almost mentoring him to be like me, and he couldn't, because he was perceived completely different to me. And we had to change the whole mentoring style to fit into the discrimination he faced. And when I realized that was the problem, which took us a while, it did take us a while. He knew before me, of course he did, but he didn't want to tell me that because he was worried how I would feel. So that was a massive eye-opener for me. And ever since then, I've been really committed to, equaling the playing field, like you've said, because it is impossible for people from ethnically diverse backgrounds to do that alone. And not because it's not capable, because it's just not possible within our society, because this structural systemic racism and discrimination exists. And the more we talk about this, and the more we talk about and disclose our own experiences from both sides, and to say, but this is how it got better, and this is how I made it a little bit better. And if everyone does that little bit to make it better, and open up doors and give people opportunities and help bring them barriers down, that's the only way this will ever get better, like it has never got better before.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to what you were saying quickly, Rachel, that yes, having these conversations is very important, but actually doing what you did, which was go and educate yourself and then ask those questions. And, asking me, I am happy if someone comes to me and asks me, is it racist for me to say this to you? I'm happy to answer that, because that is educating somebody. That is explaining to somebody what that means in terms of a microaggression, what that means in terms of a macroaggression, and what that means as overtly or covertly racist or homophobic. And actually, when somebody comes to me and hasn't spent time to go and learn about even the basics around racism and homophobia, that is when I'm sat there and become offended. Yes, have conversations with me. Yes, discuss it with me. But if you have the capability to read or listen to audio, go and watch the videos, go and read those books and have those discussions, setting that up as a safe space and saying, look, can we sit down and have a discussion, a focus group around what racism is and things like that? And can we say what we think as white people, as white straight people, what is what we would say, is it racism or homophobia? You know, educate us. That's brilliant. That is a great way to do it. And that is not going to offend any person from an ethnically diverse or LGBTQIA background. It's like, you know, I have friends whose gender identity, they are trans and they identify as they, them, their. And for the first couple of weeks when they came out to me, it took me a couple of weeks to actually get those pronouns 100% embedded into whenever I referred to them. But they were not offended to keep on correcting me until it became more behavioral, because they were aware it was unlearning a whole 28 years where I've known this person, a whole 28 years of how I've referred to them. So yeah, that's just an example. I just wanted to add that on because I loved what you just said about having conversations.
Thank you, Hunter. Ed, coming into you.
No, I think what Hunter said it in a much better way, but I think it is that kind of thing. It's like, you know, thank you for your honesty of saying, you know, I learned from this and I apologized or whatever, and say, you know what, and some people might just hide away or defend their position a lot more. Is actually, it's like, you know what, I apologize. I didn't mean to cause offense. I want to learn more, and please educate me, you know, reverse mentor me or something like that. Yeah, so I think Hunter put it in a better way than I did.
No, it's acknowledging, acknowledging those uncomfortable truths, apologizing, but then acting. And there's 7, you know, Yvonne Coghill's 7 steps is incredible for this. But it really is, this isn't complex. The understanding the complexities of systemic racism and discrimination and homophobia is, but actually the steps how you can start to you know, educate yourself and be better is really simple. But you've got to have that want, haven't you? And there lies the problem. If it doesn't affect you, it doesn't bother you. And this is where, you know, the true leaders and people who care, and where the role model aspect comes in, this is where it's important. This is where people start standing out, and the people that will be listening to this podcast, they're the people who will make the change. Ed, I'm going to come to you, then Kiran, we're coming over to you.
And I think that sometimes as people, we can do things in different ways. I think there are some people who can do the big bang stuff, who can, you know, champion, who can fight. But I think also that there's a lot of us who have our own smaller scale influences or support and things like that, and we do things that are much quieter. And I think that's the other thing to kind of think about. I think particularly as us as occupational therapists, we may not be the ones that are most prominent and shout loudest, but actually we make an impact every day with everybody's lives, and you know, we affect our patients and the families every day. And I think sometimes that we can bring about change with one person, in our small networks. We don't always need everybody to, you know, stand out there and deal with the flack, but also to be, you know, those loud voices, really.
And you know, that came, for anyone who hasn't listened to the other podcast, LGBTQI plus podcast, this exact point came up, and it was so important. You don't have to be the bolshy loud one. Actually, you can be quietly confident and achieve the same end result, and you might be much more comfortable in that space and absolutely believe in it. So thank you, Ed, for saying that. Kiran, can I come to you, please?
I was just going to touch on the point of sort of safe spaces, because I think sometimes when you work in an organisation, and let's face it, sometimes particularly the NHS can feel like such a hermetic organisation. It can be difficult to sort of instigate these safe spaces, and one of the sort of messages that I want to sort of point out, particularly for anybody in a more managerial position, is that people who are in these communities are only going to thank you for trying to facilitate these safe spaces. And I wonder if some of this is about, even as far as sort of the material, so whether that's our educational materials and having more sort of ethnically diverse people in our educational materials, to actually as far as, you know, celebrating sort of more obvious things like Black History Month, for example, it's interesting. My fiance said to me, I know it's Black History Month because because we've got Black people on the front cover of Frontline, and you don't get that every day. And I, you know, again, that's something that I think if we had more obvious, diverse materials in front of us every day, that kind of promotion will also help to facilitate and create these safe spaces for people to then have these conversations that need to be had.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, Frontline is the physiotherapy magazine, and there has been significant changes within the physiotherapy profession, including a co-opted member of the Black Asian minority ethnic network to directly to council. So that was an immediate bylaw, you know, because it is an election process that was enabled to really recognise the lack of diversity on council, but also to provide a voice, direct voice to from the BAME network. And yes, I think that's probably been a direct influence of why we had several Black physiotherapists, not only on the cover, but having significant opinion pieces wrote about them because of the influence of that group. Now, Hunter, I know you wanted to come in. Ed, I'm going to come to you because I think it's about the same point, and then we'll come down to Hunter.
Yeah, I think seeing on Twitter what CSP have done and how they've acted and been quite mature in their approach with this, and I think it's disappointing in the occupational therapy professional body, the Royal College of Occupational Therapists. I think there is a lot of anger, disappointment, surprise probably that the Royal College have not been as proactive or vocal as CSP. So I admire CSP for what they've done. So well done.
And I think that's really nice of you to say. I mean, it wasn't without challenges for the CEO in particular. She faced some backlash on social media, and I think acknowledged that with a very public statement of apology. But I think again, with regards to physiotherapy, it's a huge, I mean, there's 56,000 members. And even though Black, Asian, minority, ethnic percentages are very, very small within our profession, too small, and way below the average compared to nurses and doctors in terms of healthcare, there is a lot more pressure, I think, on the society to be active and to be doing stuff. So yeah, I think the credit is to the BAME network and the BAME members and the Black, Asian, minority physios who stood up, had a voice, and really forced the hand of many. But I completely agree, Ed, the way that is all come together now, and the rapid change that is happening needs to be applauded. And I don't know if you know lecturer Mish on Twitter, but she's now a friend of mine through podcasts, and she's extremely vocal, and she's a real activist, isn't she? So Hunter, coming to you, then Arun, coming down to you.
I just wanted to say that I agree. Ed, just your point that you just said, it echoes exactly my sentiment and the sentiment of almost every other ethnically diverse OT that I know, that the ARCOT's response, and yet still, despite us voicing our disappointment and anger at ARCOT, they have still not made a single move forward, which is even more disappointing. I'm sorry, but if somebody's telling you this isn't right, this is still racist, and you regurgitating your equality and diversity policies, that is not enough. You do something different, but they haven't. And that, is something we, I suppose, have to challenge again and again and again until our professional bodies do make those changes. But I just wanted to pick up on a point that actually, we have spoken quite a bit about racial equality, but I wanted to also pick up about sexual identity and being of an ethnic minority background and gender identity, actually, and being from an ethnic minority background. You face those challenges, not within your own culture as well, but also within the wider network of, that sense of belonging. You do not feel like you belong anywhere. If you go out to So, for example, if I went out with my husband and my husband's Caucasian and they're friends, and I've gone to the bar to order some food and some drinks, and it's my round to buy them all drinks, I will go there and it will be half an hour before I'm served. If I am sat in if I go to a doctor's surgery, I am asked questions like I'm an idiot. And I will then turn around and say to them, I am an occupational therapist, and they will be embarrassed. But they are the questions they would not normally ask other patients, which, you know, as a healthcare professional, you know the kind of line of questioning that need to be go down, and that's not the kind of line of questioning that's gone down. So there is a lot of both sexual identity, gender identity, and racial inequality. And that's why I think having AHP role models from ethnically diverse and actually LGBTQIA diverse backgrounds.
Oh, I think we've lost you a little bit there, Hunter. Your Wi-Fi was doing so well.
It's saying, hello?
Oh, we've got you,
Hello?
Asses. We just lost you for a second there, but we've got you back, Hunter. Your Wi-Fi was doing so well.
Yeah, it's just we need, sorry about that. We need those. We need those. You know, those role models are needed because it's about when the first man or woman made fire, they made it easier to show other people and teach other people how to make fire and cook food. If we've gone down this road and we've experienced all these hardships, we can school other people. No, don't lose your confidence. Don't lose your nerve. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be tough, but cope with it by coming and talking to us. If you don't get that coping and that support from your clinical supervision, because your clinical supervisor is Caucasian and is not of LGBTQIA background and cannot fathom what you're going through, talk to us. Come and talk to us, or talk to somebody else that is in your profession or in the healthcare sector that is of similar background. Don't go it alone.
So Hunter, you have just moved us into this final stage, which is talking about, and I think you've just probably articulated your side of it really nicely, why you are here as an inspirational role model. And this is where you need to dig deep, everyone, because I need you to tell the world that is listening about why you are an inspirational role model and what, you know, people have either got from you in the past, how you've inspired someone. You can relate this to how you've been inspired as well. But I want everyone just to tell me that story. And for people that are listening, you know, providing hope. We've already acknowledged and identified the additional challenges people will feel from ethnically diverse background and LGBTQI+ community. We've got role models here that can be reached out to. And really, it's encouraging people, like you've just said, Hunter, to have that confidence, to know that you matter, to know that you're as good, if not better, because of the challenges you've been through, and how you can not only help your profession, but your patients. And I think that's been the common theme throughout. We need to represent the community that we serve. So, Ed, I'm going to put you on the spot and come to you first. Tell us why you're an inspirational role model.
I don't know, because you told me.
Because I told you were.
I was quite happy, like, hiding away, being, you know, doing my own thing, and it's like getting invites, like, Ed, come on to this and talk. Okay. Oh, I don't know. I think. I think, I think it is. It's, you know, I like using metaphors. I think you know, kind of, you know, this journey I've been on. You know, it has been tough, kind of coming to terms with my sexuality, not wanting to be Chinese. You know, I'm of a generation where we worked really hard as children in our parents' Chinese takeaway. We were that kind of stereotype, you know, doing all sorts of things, all our responsibility, having to be quite academic, all these kind of pressures. and kind of how to reconcile that, how to fit in with Western society, how to deal with my identity, how to, am I pretty enough to get, a boyfriend, and all those kind of things. So we kind of like, there's just lots and lots of pressure, really. And I think it is like trying to hide, trying to please others just doesn't work. It takes a brave step to kind of be true to yourself, and it does. There are people who don't like it, aren't happy about it, but there are other people out there who are there to support you. Find out who your true friends are. You come across other people who just are become the best friends, and yeah, it's tough, but you can get through this. Some people don't, unfortunately we do have a lot of mental health problems in our LGBTQI plus community, unfortunately. But sometimes it helps you to kind of focus on what your values are, what's important, and being true to yourself, and finding like-minded people. So it can get really good. I'm reaching a certain age. 30 years ago, I would not imagine the life I have now and the happiness I have now. So it can get pretty awesome. Do it your own way. Sometimes I've rebelled against a profession and setting goals, and I've just gone with the flow, and amazing things happen. And the less effort I put into things, the more beautiful things seem to come my way. So that's my way of doing it.
Oh, I love that, Ed. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Arun, coming to you now.
Oh, again, I self-nominated myself, Rachel. So, mainly I think coming from a different country and doing a postgrad here, and then integrating into the NHS system in different places such as Glasgow and Norfolk and Oxford and different areas, had its own challenges in terms of coming as an outsider, as well as and getting integrated into a completely different society, which thinks differently, which acts differently and everything. And I think one of the main things that we haven't comprehensively covered is thinking about mental health as such. So if you need to ask me who is my role model, I have to tell that I sought a therapist of my own. So I went for therapy, which is more of a psychodynamic approach. I met a therapist like every once a week for nearly 5 years, whilst I was actually employed in the NHS, because whilst you are trying to fit in as well as do a lot of things, you can be prone to lots of anxiety as well as low mood and everything, and it can have a big toll. And as Ed was saying as well, it could be quite difficult for you to do a lot of things. And there's lots of stigma around seeking a therapist, especially in academia as well as research, whether that would actually make you a good therapist, etc. But I think that is one of the best things that I've ever done. And I would actually advocate anyone and everyone to actually seek a therapist, because we were able to discuss all the issues that we have discussed today in a very safe and confidential manner, and trying to see it's not just from a unilateral perspective, but also see from both the side of things, as well as come to a common ground of what practical strategies that would work for you, because one size doesn't fit all. Everyone's journey is quite different, and we cannot protocolize how we need to behave as a society towards an individual from LGBT, BAME Pakistani background to Indian background to an European background, and it's going to be very difficult. So I feel that there has been lots of hurdles. When I got my first Band 6 job, I have to attend 15 interviews before I could be actually selected for one. And I had lots of practical skills initially, but one thing is perseverance and believing in yourself, as well as the hard work, as well as determination, and always think that you can actually do it. And having nice friends around, as well as there were also very understanding managers, and the managers whom I really like to work with are the ones who not about high clinical expertise, but who had very high emotional intelligence of understanding about how different personalities work and all those things. So yeah, so that's what I feel. And touching upon the CSP thing as well, and I think practically listening to just Ed's and Kiran's and the other person's, I couldn't remember the name, Hunter, yeah, Hunter's narrative. We have got lots of themes here, and it's very important. For example, in Oxford University, now they have started the Black Scholarship Fund, and there are lots of Black students who can enter into the University of Oxford as such through that scholarship and actually use those resources. And it's not just for the high white class privileged institution. So I feel that we as CSP need to actually make funds for listening to high amount of narratives for people as well as for patients as well as ex-students, and listen to all of them and create a project which could actually address these narratives so that we can have an integrated approach of how we can actually solve this problem as such, is what I would like to say. Yeah.
Well, I actually know someone who's trying to get funding for that exact project, so I can definitely link you up with her. So I think that's a great idea, and I think has been acknowledged for sure. Hunter, coming into you next, and thanks for sharing that. That was just so powerful. I was just engrossed in what you were saying there for the last couple of minutes. Thank you. Hunter.
So I don't know who nominated me, but whoever it was, thanks, I suppose. No, in all genuineness, a role model, a role model I've had in my 30 odd years of life so far, so many different experiences and had to face so many different challenges. How was it that a psychiatrist that I worked with turned around and said to me, they said, you've had to face more than 3 people's worth of lifetimes worth of experiences. And so I wouldn't expect anything but some wisdom from you. I don't think I'm wise, but what I do think I am is I'm straightforward, I'm honest, I will listen, and I believe that actually, those experiences that have taught me a lot, and I don't think that I can teach anybody anything, but what I can do is I can be there to support others on their journeys and listen and guide them and help them figure out their choices and their decisions. But the one thing I would say is don't let anyone ever tell you that you have to be someone different than who you are, because actually the patients that we all treat are all very different people. And if we were all the same people who conform to that heteronormative, white, Caucasian, British, and I'm doing inverted commas here, values, then we would not be able to treat even 50% of our patients, because we would not be recognizing those differences and those difficulties, which may well be why LGBTQIA people have higher levels of mental health difficulties, but lower levels of access to mental health services, and why men are 3 times more likely than a woman to commit suicide, to complete suicide and have mental health difficulties, yet they are the least likely to access mental health services. So I would just like to say, don't let anybody tell you that being different is wrong. It's not. Just look at the 5 of us on this talk tonight. There's 5 of us, isn't there? Yes, I've counted right. We are all so different. We are all so different. I mean, and that is what I've just loved about this, Rachel. So thank you so much. And I have to say as well, it is so refreshing to hear from somebody who's been a manager in the NHS, who sits there and says to me, yes, I admit there was institutional racism, and it was within my own practice as well. And I have changed, I have learned, I have developed, and I aim to make those changes happen. It is refreshing and heartwarming and gives me hope as a practitioner that there are you out there. So
thank you. But honestly, this is about you, and this is just the start of all of our journeys together. So we are going to do a whole series on this. We just need to know what it looks like. But for now, Hunter, you are the inspirational role model, and I thank you for everything you've contributed tonight.
So to our Caucasian listeners and our straight listeners, please do not be afraid to ask those questions. You know, our Twitter handles will be available. Please don't be afraid to ask those questions. I promise you, the amount of racism, homophobia, violence, aggression, physical and verbal, that I can say for myself personally that I've been through, there is nothing you could ask me that would offend me. I will sit there and I will answer your questions as and when I'm able to get to them. Do not be afraid to ask me those questions.
Hear, hear.
And last but not least, right,
my goodness, how can I follow that? I mean, everything that I think needs to be said has already been said. I mean, the only things that I would sort of add to that are touching on sort of the mental health points. We know that the research from Stonewall says that staff who are, particularly in the NHS, staff that are more open about their sexual orientation are more likely to enjoy going to work. They're more confident and ultimately more productive. So whether you're somebody who is really struggling or a manager thinking about how to improve the workplace, please think about having these conversations. If you're not already having them, please try and find ways to have these conversations, and don't be afraid to reach out. We're here, as you know, as Hunter's already said, so do message us on Twitter, and please do continue to have these conversations. And thank you so much, Rachel, for opening this up for us as well as a forum, and hopefully it will be something that will sort of really help create some momentum for change.
Thank you so much. So I never like to have the last word, but I do need to close and say thanks to this incredible panel. I've already mentioned this is just the start. So you're going to see these beautiful faces again, and you're going to hear that wonderful voice from Hunter. And I really hope everyone has a great AHP Day 2020. And please leave us lots of comments. Thank you very much.